Let's go back. Then after the table layout, we have the grid view. If any person has any doubts at this point of time, say with respect to the linear layouts, the relative layouts, the table layouts, you can write on the chat window. Is this clear to everyone? And the relative layouts, the linear layouts and all? So I have a poll question for all of you here. Here I have a poll question for all of you. To you can just take a look on your screens here. Here is the poll question for you. Which layout arranges its children in a single column or a single row? Is it the linear layout? Is it the relative layout? Is it the table layout? Or is it the absolute layout? You can just cast your votes against the question here. So you can cast your votes here. The options are the linear layout, the relative layout, the table layout, and the absolute layout. So which layout arranges its children in a single column or a single row? In order to cast your votes, you can just click on the screen or the radio button, and or whatever you will be casting, your votes will be taken off. I think majority of the people are just taking their time. So let them just finish with the poll, and then we'll be responding to the what is the correct answer to the poll. Okay, I think we have got all the responses here. So the answer that I have got majorly from the people is the correct option is the linear layout, and this is the right answer. So 67% of the people voted correctly. So I think majority of the people just got confused by the column and row context here. But it is the linear layout that arranges its children in a single column, say in a vertical orientation or in a horizontal orientation. So that is the correct answer to it. Now let's take a look at another very important layout here, a grid view. So when I talk about a grid view, you can think of a grid view as a view group that displays items in a two-dimensional scrollable grid. So when you might have come across a situation wherein you might be using a two-dimensional grid view, which is very much like, say, if I have, say, 5 columns, I have 5 rows, I need to have something which gives me a look of a grid view. So let's take an example of a grid view here. So this is an example I can show you here. We have the linear layout. Under the linear layout, we have created a grid view, and we have the number of there are various attributes which I'll just take care of in the sample that I'll be covering. As you can see on the right here, you can have a grid view like it has got 2 columns and it has got 4 rows, though it is all getting generated dynamically, because I'll just show you how it is getting generated dynamically. So let's take an example of the grid view. Instead of the table layout here, what I'll be using is I'll be using a grid view here. And in the grid view, what I'll do is I'll just close this grid view here. Or what I'll do here is I'll just delete this all, create a new here. I'll create a linear layout here. And I'll just close this linear layout. Under the linear layout, what I can do is I also need to have the XML schema here. So I'll just type it up. It says, and then I can have the XML version, which is already shoved in when I create a new class here. Say I say version 1.0, because this is the normal naming convention that we follow here. All right, I'm done with this. Then I need to have the encoding, which it will be reading out. So I say encoding, and I say equal to What it supports is the UTF-8 encoding. And when I done this, I just close it with a question mark and a closing braces. So this is the XML version that I'm using here. Now what I'll do is I'll create an XML string here. I'll create an XML NS here, and I'll create Android here, and then I'll be just typing in the schema here which Android uses. Which I just do. I'm also seeing a question coming up from Mohit here. So Mohit is asking me, in every layout we can arrange them in a single row or column, isn't it? Mohit, I showed you an example of a relative layout wherein I was not specifying anything. And what I was doing was I just placed those views randomly. In that case, what happened was that the views were not getting one after the other, generated one after the other. It was all getting hodgepodge in the user interface. So a relative layout cannot have those kind of attributes. Similarly, if I talk about a table layout, it definitely say places the various table rows one after the other. But the only difference between a linear layout and a table layout is you can have multiple table rows. If I talk about the table linear layout, you need to have the multiple linear layouts for the table rows in the table layout. So that is the difference between how we do it here. I don't know why it got just corrupt here. What I'll do here is I'll just open it up from here. Okay. Now what I need is I need to have close this linear layout here. I'll just close this linear layout. I'll create a grid view here. Under the grid view, what I'll be doing is I'll be giving it an ID, because what I'll be doing is I'll be populating this grid view from the activity itself. So let's just quickly give it an ID here. I'll use the ID attribute here. Sorry, I'll use the ID attribute here, and I'll say @ID/ I say grid list. Once I have given it the ID, I need to also align the width and height to it. So I'll just layout width, and I'll say fill parent. Again, I'll have to have the height here, and I say fill parent. Once I'm done with this, now I'll be showing you here another important attribute here. I can define the number of columns that a grid view can hold. In the number of columns property, I have a property which is already available to me, which is auto fit. So if I have, say, a screen size, depending upon the screen size that I have on a particular device, the grid views, the number of columns in the grid view will fill automatically. So is this clear to everyone why we have the auto fit property here? I'll just show what the error is. All right, once I do a save, it works fine. Now I have to utilize this grid view in the activity I have. So I'll just take a context here. I'll just create an object here. I'll use a private object here. I say private grid view, and I say grid. Once I'm done set with the content view, I just take the object here. I say grid equal to, I do a casting here. Grid view. I just need to find this view by ID here, since this is the one that I'll be taking here, and I say grid list. So what I have done here is I've created a grid view in the XML, and now I have retrieved that grid view with the object grid in the same activity that I want to use it in. All right. Now I need to have the content that I need to pass on to the grid view. So I have already made a string array here for the sake of convenience, just in order to save some time. Here I have a array of cities, various cities that I want to show on the grid view. All right. So after this array, what I need to do is I need to populate these values into the grid view. For the population string, we have the array adapter here. As you can see here, there is the array adapter in the widget part. When I click on the array adapter, it asks me for the type of parameterized. Since this is a parameterized thing, so I'll just parameterize it with a string. So what an array adapter does is it actually gives you the data input to the grid view. One can think of it as like a data pumping source for the grid view. After I have created it, I just need to assign an object to it, and I need to create a new array adapter here. Once you go and create a new array adapter, you are shown the various constructor values there here that comes along with it. So I can choose anyone depending upon the usage that I want to do. So it asks me for the context here. So the context is the, say I have this activity here, which is say test activity. I'll use this context as test activity dot this. Then it asks me for the resource. Here the resource is the type of layout that I want to supply it, so that it can say if I have to use these various string cities that I'm using in this string array, I need to show them somehow. What is the actual layout, how I want it is something which I'll be passing in here now. So what I'll do is, instead of having a custom layout here, I'll use the Android provided resources to me. Here you can see that I have not used the one that I have in the project. Here I have preceded this by the value Android dot r dot, and here I have the layout attribute again in the Android also. So I use this layout attribute, and then I have the simple list item 1. So these are the ones that are provided to me by Android itself. So I have chosen this here, and now it asks me for the various IDs. So it is the actual array that I want to pass, and I say I'll just name the array here, which is cities. So I'll just pass this array, and I'll just close this constructor here for the array adapter here. So once I'm done with this, I need to set this array adapter to the grid view. So which I'll just do now. I'll say grid dot set adapter, and I say adapter, because this is the data source that the grid has to utilize. Once I'm done with this, I think I'm good to go with my grid view. But I can also show you here a grid view on list item click. So I'll just do it here. I'll say on the actual object of the grid, I'll share the on click listener, and then I have the new on click listener. I don't have it's on item click listener, because in the grid view I'll be using the item click here. I'll just do it, just a sec. I'll say grid dot set on item. I'll say on item click listener. Here I'll be creating new on item click listener, because in the grid views what we have is we have the item click listeners here. I just chose to override the unimplemented methods, terminate with this with a semicolon here, and then I just need to show what all value I have selected in the grid. So here what I'll do is I'll use a toast message here. So a toast is something in Android which just displays something onto the screen. So you can think of as a passing text. which shows on the screen. So I'll just use a toast here. I'll use a toast.make text property here, and in the context I'll again pass the same context that I had given here, test activity, and then it asks me for the text. What exactly is the text that I want to display? So here in the text, what I'll be doing is I'll be having the cities, and I need to actually pass in the position of the cities. So my argument 3 here, you can see the int argument, it gives me the actual position of the value that I have just selected in the particular say array, and it also asks me for the duration here. I can say a duration of length. I can have any length, say length short, length long. I can use any one, which I'll use the short length here. And after all this, I just need to show this text to the user. So this is, I'm done with the toast implementation here. So now I'll just go to run this example here. I say run as Android application. Just open the emulator here. And once I have opened the emulator, you can see here I have placed a grid view, and since I have placed it in the autofit manner, so it is showing up 2 columns in a row. And once I click on any one, you can see here the item that I have clicked on is shown on the screen at the bottom here. Suppose I click on say Detroit, so it is displayed at the bottom. I hope the example of grid view is clear to everyone. So what I had shown here is I had created a grid view in the layout XML file, and then what I did was I created an adapter here. In the adapter, I passed the Android list view item here, and then I set the adapter to the grid view, and on the on item click listener, I just made a display of the text what had been selected by the user. I hope this is clear to everyone. You can just write any query if you have on the chat window here. So Mohit had asked me a question here. In every layout, we can arrange them in a single row or column, isn't it? So Mohit, I think I have answered that query of yours, that you can do that, but for doing that, you might need to have multiple linear layouts if you're not using the table layout in this case. Harpreet is asking me, can you give me an overview of the context? Here, Harpreet, what context means is, suppose if I'm having an activity, I need to have a context of that activity. So this is what is meant by context in Android. It is like very much like the object, the class object that you want to utilize it on. Is this clear to you now? It is very much like the class context that one can think of. Say you always call this or something, so this or super. So this is very much like the same context. Is this clear to you now, Harpreet? You can write on the chat window so that we can move ahead with the topic that we have. Harpreet is saying get application context can be used. Yes, Harpreet, definitely get application context can also be used. It gives you the complete application's context as a whole. But if you're using it activity by activity, so I would suggest that you use the context of the activity itself. So Abhijit has asked me a question here. What is the difference between a view and a layout? To precisely put it, I'll say a view is the widget that we use, and a layout is the view group, as I had showed you. So when I talk about a view group can contain various views, while a view is a standalone component. I hope this is clear to you. So if I take an example here, if I say the linear layout is a view group, under the view group linear layout, we have another view group which is the grid view. But if I suppose I insert a text view here just beneath the linear layout and above the grid view, so that text view is a view for me because it is a part of the view group, which is the linear layout. Is this clear to you, Abhijit, now? What is the difference between a view and a layout? It is majorly the difference like when we say a view and a view group.